from Lotto, for example, the tax on that was not implemented. And I know that for sure, for a fact. Because as finance minister, I held several meetings on how to implement it, following petition from National Lotteries Authority. And I facilitated meetings between NLA and GRA to discuss how to implement. So I know for a fact that it wasn't implemented. And so I could not be taking advantage of the mistake the minister made. Reasonably, if you know that betting tax is different from other taxes on lotteries, and the minister in the same statement sought to equate the two, then I needed to explain that the betting tax he was referring to had actually not been implemented. But I can also understand that, I've listened to myself again, I've listened to the statement, and it appears the statement created an impression that I meant betting tax as it relates to bet winnings was not implemented. If that's the impression that was created by my statement, then that was inaccurate on my part. But what I really wanted to say was that what he called betting tax, as in taxes on lotto winning, was not implemented. And so I think that explains the matter.
Oh.
But I think, let me add a few issues. I think I have some issues with that. Number one, I would like to observe that I was somehow suspicious, really, whether the minister wanted to abolish the betting tax. Because if your manifesto promised that you would abolish bet winnings, which is the betting tax, I was expecting it to be very specific. That I will abolish betting tax or bet winnings, the words used in the manifesto. But to confuse betting tax as in bet winnings with taxes on other forms of lottery, or lottery if you like, for me, created a certain sense on my mind that the minister really was not clearly communicating what he intended to do. And so I asked myself, is he talking about abolishing betting tax, or tax on lotto winnings, or tax on winnings from games of chance? Which one is he communicating to the people of Ghana? I could not be sure. Then also, in another vein, you could interpret it to mean that betting is a subset of lotteries. And that is what the law says. But the law defines betting from other forms of lottery. The law provides definition for betting, and then also lotteries, which encompasses betting, games of chance, lotto, etc., etc. And so, if you want to abolish betting tax, you have to be very clear about that, because you cannot use betting tax to generalize for tax on the winnings from the other games of chances. So this was my confusion as well. And so, yes, and even the act that he's seeking to amend was not included in the acts that he wants to amend, for the 2025 fiscal year. And so I was really not sure whether the minister meant what they promised in their manifesto. And so to sum it all, whilst I consider my statement was misleading without the clarifications I have provided today, the confusion about betting tax or lottery winning tax is not me, because he didn't mention the income tax amendment, which contains the betting tax. So if the government decides that they will now abolish it and submit the bill to Parliament, it will come to our committee, the Finance Committee, and we'll interrogate that, and we'll seek the clarity from the minister. But the people of Ghana deserve to have clarity. Just have provided clarity on what I meant. He also needs to provide clarity on what he meant to the people of Ghana. So I hope this matter comes to rest, right?
So,
So on what basis did you validate the 49.2 billion Ghana cedis before putting it in the data, which threw the fiscal deficit away? And you come and announce to the Ghanaian public that the government mismanaged the fiscals of the country. This is Azar, this is Sakawa.
Focus.
The technical people at the Ministry of Finance are professionals. And I don't know if the Honorable Ato refused their advice. What I do know is that we've gone through 3 successful IMF reviews, and the technical people never told us that we needed to compile claims from several years and include it in the fiscal framework as if they were accumulated in 2024 alone. We were never told that. 3 reviews. Why they will do that in the last review, the 4th review, that is going to happen, we don't understand. And this is why even the IMF has to speak to this. Because you cannot have inconsistent methodologies in assessing program implementation. You did the first review, the second review, the third review. You didn't bring arrears from multi-years into the fiscal framework. You use only arrears accumulated from the beginning of the fiscal year, the very fiscal year you are assessing. 3 of them, you didn't do that. Then the 4th one, you asked ministries and agencies and departments that they should just write what projects have they done which have not been paid. And they brought you those projects and you compiled it, amounted to 49 billion, and you say these are claims that must go into the fiscal data. Unfortunately, what the Honorable Minister failed to do is that the only arrears, so-called arrears, that we can call arrears, are those that have gone into the gift mix system, because they have been audited, they have been verified. But any other thing that you call claims cannot be arrears unless they go through the verification and auditing and the system, the gift mix system. Yet, you take the budget statement, you look at the fiscal table, and you will see that the minister, under the arrears clearance, has 2 lines under arrears build up. The first line is arrears reported in the gift mix. Then the second line, which he created artificially, he called it unreleased claims. Unreleased claims. That is very alien to the fiscal framework. And that 49.2 billion is what took the fiscals out of gear. So we know what they did. Ladies and gentlemen, even the IMF technical memorandum defines how to derive primary fiscal balance. The IMF technical memorandum that we signed with them, government of Ghana signed with them, states that the program's primary fiscal balance is cumulative from the beginning of the fiscal year. So if you go and bring arrears dating back to 2012 or claims dating back to 2012, 2013, when the IMF's own definition of primary fiscal balance says those accumulated from the beginning of the fiscal year, you see the challenge there. That is one of the challenges. Then the definition goes further to say that which is measured as the difference between the primary balance on cash basis from the finances side, that's the difference between revenue and expenditure, and then also net change in the stock of payables or arrears of the central government reported in gift mix. The IMF has stated that clearly, reported in gift mix. So first, the definition says accumulated from the beginning of the fiscal year. You have brought in claims from several years. The definition also says that they should be reported in gift mix. And you have brought data which is not reported in gift mix. And you come and tell us you have done justice to the fiscals. No. This is statistical thievery. Ladies and gentlemen, the government must therefore explain how they came by the methodology used in computing the fiscal balances. I am really lost as to how they drive the fiscal balances without fully applying the methodology agreed with the IMF in the technical memorandum of understanding. What is even more concerning, ladies and gentlemen, is the minister proudly declaring to the world, based on the voodoo computations he has done, that his country has breached the IMF program. when the evidence is to the contrary. And when the IMF itself is set to conduct a review of program implementation in April 2025. So IMF is here to do their review. But the minister, whose performance is to be reviewed, has already announced to the world that he has breached. The NPP is no longer in government. The NDC is in government. And so if there is a breach, it is not the NPP that has breached. It is the government of Ghana under President Mahama that has breached. I believe they don't know this. But ladies and gentlemen, is it not even surprising that the finance minister of a country will wish his country drilling an IMF program even before the IMF conducts a review? Yet, the same minister in the same budget projected foreign financing for his budget for the year to include $720 million from the IMF and $600 million from the World Bank. How come the government doesn't know that when Ghana fails a review, IMF review, because of the manipulated data they used, they will not receive the $1.3 billion from the IMF and the World Bank? How come they don't know that? And yet you go and put $1.3 billion in the budget that you will receive from the IMF and the World Bank, and you are declaring that you have breached. And when you breach, the money will not be disbursed. So this already throws your budget off gear. So this budget cannot be a realistic budget. Ladies and gentlemen, do they even know that all the reliefs we got as a country from the debt restructuring we did with our Eurobond holders, with our bilateral official creditors, bringing us outright cancellation of almost 4 billion of our debts. Outright cancellation of almost 4 billion of the debts we owe them. And then $7.5 billion of debt service relief. If you put all of them together, you are talking about 12 billion United States dollars that the NPP government negotiated and got these reliefs for Ghana. But this is also tied to the IMF program. So breaching an IMF program means that you go back to the status quo before the debt restructuring. Are they aware of that? I believe they have been briefed, but they've ignored good advice. Do they even know that when all this happened, Ghana will be brought back to unsustainable debt levels and occasion an economic crisis? How will they fund the programs outlined in the budget then? How about investor credibility? On the 2025 fiscal framework, another baseless revelation in the budget is the projection of a sudden reduction in the commitment primary deficit from 3.9% of GDP in 2024 to a sudden primary surplus of 1.5% of GDP in 2025. I wish it were that simple to adjust by 5.4 percentage points between 1 year. I wish it could be done. But this is not possible. And so again, their projection of the fiscal balances for 2025 make this budget not credible and requiring serious scrutiny by the IMF and the people of Ghana. We, the mighty minority, would like to call on the IMF to speak to this in the spirit of transparency, which is one of the cardinal values of the fund. This should be done as a matter of urgency before much damage is done to our country's economy. Already, the government has announced it is returning to the bond market, yet they could not even acknowledge the enhanced debt environment created by the previous NPP government for bringing Ghana's debt to GDP ratio at the end of 2024 to 61.8%. 61.8%. You recall, we had to go to the IMF because of debt distress. 61.8%. That should tell you that this is not by magic. This is as a result of skilled negotiation by the government. It's as a result of the implementation of a very powerful debt strategy that we have had to implement to bring the debt levels to that level. And ladies and gentlemen, let me add that the 61.8% debt to GDP ratio is lower than the pre-COVID-19 debt to GDP ratio of 65.7% in 2019. So if you look at the debt trajectory, you will see before COVID, our debt to GDP ratio was lower. But because we had to borrow so much to finance our COVID interventions, we had to borrow also to do the to address the effect of the Russia-Ukraine war. We had to borrow for the financial cleanup exercise as well. The debt levels went to that 80%. And so if we have now brought it to the level better than the 2019 pre-COVID, it tells you that the MPP government has successfully brought Ghana's debt levels to accelerated, sustainable path. The least the NDC can do is to continue to implement our debt strategy. After all, what is the target of the IMF as far as our debt levels are concerned? The IMF projects Ghana to achieve a target of 55% debt to GDP in net present value terms by 2028. 2028. If by the end of 2024, we've already brought it down to 61.8%, then it means that it is left with just 6 percentage points to achieve the IMF target. And so the NDC government should be able to achieve this in the middle of this year, long ahead of 2028. But Gideon will tell you, the way they've started borrowing, the rate at which they are borrowing, we are very worried that they may return us to unsustainable debt levels. Let me add that these debt levels I'm talking about, 61.8%, compares favorably with the NDC's debt to GDP of 73% in 2016 when they left government, until the GDP was rebased in 2018 before the figure changed. But the actual performance in terms of debt sustainability by the time the NDC left office was 73%. So you are saying that MPP has overborrowed. Yet we ended our tenure with 61.8%. But you, who didn't borrow, you ended your tenure with 73%. Ladies and gentlemen, it is surprising nevertheless that notwithstanding the improvement in the debt environment, the timing of the announcement of the minister to enter bond markets, and I'm sure you have heard the minister has announced that he is going into the bond markets. They are going to open up the bond markets. And I'm saying that this is not good advice. And this is my reason. The timing for the announcement of the minister to open the bond market with the announcement of the elevated fiscal deficit based on their manipulated data, a condition that exposes the country to high risk of borrowing from the markets. The effects of this unfortunate data manipulation are already hitting our economy, already, since they read the budget. Why do I say that? The government must know that just by presenting such erroneous data as propaganda to score cheap political points, Ghana's sovereign bond spreads are already widening, again, nearing 700 basis points. When almost 3 months ago, this had declined to 500 basis points and was even heading further downwards. Why do we want to destroy the gains which we have made through cheap politics? Also, Bloomberg reported last Tuesday, 11th March, the very day the budget was presented to Parliament, that Ghana's dollar sovereign bonds were among bottom performers in emerging markets, after the Minister for Finance said the country meets a primary budget balance target of 2024. Just after saying that, this is what the market is saying to us. Dollar bonds due 2035 declined 1.8%. Notes maturing in 2029 fell by 1%. So international markets have not reacted kindly to the budget, demonstrating their lack of confidence in the government's economic policy direction. So you see, if you cook figures to create a narrative to run your country down, international investors will show you where power lies. That is what is happening to Ghana already. Sadly, if you decided to take away the 49.2 billion cedis they put in the fiscal framework, the overall fiscal deficit will be 3.4%, not the 7.6% the minister announced. And the primary balance will be surplus 0.6%, not the deficit 3.1% the minister announced. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, both the overall deficit and the primary balance would have been better than the targets in the 2024 budget, as well as the IMF targets for the next IMF review to be conducted in April this year. Sorry to say, the government didn't want this good narrative because that would have signified the prudent performance of the economy under the MPP. But they didn't want that, and therefore Ghana should suffer. I am wondering how well the international markets would have responded to the budget if an accurate picture was put out. Ghana is the loser. I'm sorry about this. Ghana is the loser